everybody. Welcome back to a great edition of Wrestling with the Future. I'm your host, Psychic Medium Angelo, joined tonight by my co-host, Dan the Man Sebastiano. Dan, how you doing, brother?
I'm great tonight, Angelo. How are you?
I'm better than average.
All right.
Is that good enough for you?
Hey, it's the best you can ask for on some days.
Baby, if I was any better, there'd be two of me. Joined tonight by Mike, the filmmaker, movie maker, documentarian, actor, producer, writer, director. What the hell else don't you do, Mikey?
I'm an
Mike
acting
Messier.
coach. I run a Avalonia Film Festival, but most importantly, Angelo, the Life Lessons podcast, video cast, which people can see on the Wrestling with the Future YouTube channel. Hopefully everyone subscribes.
Absolutely. And if his name was a website, it would be MikeMessier.com. And we're joined by a new panelist tonight, a guy who I came across and had an immediate connection with. His name is Mike Schroeder, but people know him far and wide as Tombstone Jesus. He's with Devotion Championship Wrestling in Salt Lake City, Utah. Mike, or I should say Tombstone, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, happy to be here, guys. Can't tell you how happy I am to be here. My gym opened yesterday. You couldn't see a happier guy than this right now. Get to speak to one of my heroes. Oh, my goodness. Here we go, brother.
Well, here we go is right, brother. We got without further ado, we're going to forego all of our usual formalities tonight, and we're just going to bring in our guest. Magnum TA received the Thesz Heavyweight Championship Award. The award is given to an individual in wrestling who has taken the skills of the sport into the realm of public service. Allen began his career competing in championship wrestling from Florida, Mid-South Wrestling, before becoming a nationally known household word in Jim Crockett Promotions. He worked behind the scenes at Jim Crockett and World Championship Wrestling and inspired millions by overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds after a debilitating injury. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only, Magnum TA. Terry, welcome to Wrestling with the Future.
Man, how do I follow that intro, guys? That was awesome. I'm glad to be here.
Well, brother, I'm going to tell you something. You are among your friends and your peers, and we love you. And we are so happy to hear your voice.
Well, thank you, guys. It's a pleasure. I'm glad we were able to pull this together with all the trials and tribulations going on around the world. It's remarkable to be able to escape for a few minutes back to a much more pleasant time in life.
Amen. You know, I made a prediction a few weeks back, Terry. I said coronavirus is no match for the world of professional wrestling. Wrestling, in fact, will save us from the dreaded COVID-19. And I stand by that statement, and I will be proven right here in about 4 weeks.
There you go.
Dan, why are you laughing at me?
Oh, no, I was laughing. I was saying that's funny to think about that of everything to be a salvation, it'd be wrestling.
Think of the one company that would unlikely to be given essential status was a wrestling company.
Right.
Well, they gave Florida 18 million reasons to call them essential.
Absolutely. Well, normally I would be the first question out, Magnum, but I got a very special guest here tonight. He is an independent worker. He is with Devotion Championship Wrestling in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Tombstone Jesus. Tombstone, it's all yours. You get the first question from Magnum TA.
Thank you. Magnum, Terry Allen, sir, it is a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. I'm always glad to intermingle with folks that share the passion for what we did so many years ago.
I'll tell you, I was born in 1970 and was just a huge fan. I got a chance to become a wrestler a little later in life, and I took it. But growing up, I don't know if you can see me right now or not, but you were a huge influence in myself. And in the ring and in arenas, people come up to me all the time and they say, "Hey, Magnum TA," and I says, "Yeah, I wish,"
Yeah, yeah.
so
I got to
I
interrupt you there,
think I,
Tombstone, for just a second, because Magnum, I got to tell you, he looks an awful lot like you, brother. It's scary.
Really, I wish well, I'll have to go back and watch this. I'm sorry I couldn't join you guys via video, but I look forward to seeing it. It's funny because I was flipping through my phone waiting for you guys, and I saw an old picture of Scott Hall when Scott was young and doing the Magnum Scott Hall gimmick. I don't know if you guys even remember that.
Yeah, the
Absolutely.
NWA.
Oh
He
yeah.
looked like a giant version of me, and it was just so funny.
Yeah.
I was
And I
gonna
mean,
bring that up, and
yeah,
it kind of leads into my question. So, like I say, for me being a young kid, I was inspired by comic books, and then I saw wrestling, and then I saw real life superheroes, and it was the first time I'd seen men with physiques. And I know you were somewhat of a fan when you were young, and my question is, I look to you. There was a few guys that kind of had that look, but nobody brought it together like you did, as far as having that look, but being that fit. You have the size. You could believably take on anybody, have a good match with a huge monster or a quick guy, I mean, you could just bring it all together. And that look you had, it kind of come out of the 70s. And when I was a kid, I was adopted, you guys, so I had no idea what I was going to look like when I grew up. But I goddamn for sure wanted to have hair on my chest. You know what I mean? And it was because of guys that were just studs like Magnum. And just
Absolutely.
what influenced you, when you were a kid? Because I don't know if there's many wrestlers that really kind of had that look. That look kind of come out of the 70s. But who inspired
yeah.
you when you were younger?
Well, I grew, like
Great
you said,
question.
I was born in 1959, so I grew up, with cowboys and John Wayne and Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson and tough good guys, that were
Right.
a different mold, and then then you sprinkle, Bruce Lee came in the scene in the like 1971, 72, and by the time I knew who he was already dead. But those kind of people influenced me as far as the the good guys that I grew up watching in the westerns and the different things and all the Clint Eastwood movies that I liked so much when I was a kid. And I watched wrestling from the time I was about, earliest memories I have of watching TV with my dad. I was like 6, 7 years old, and we'd watch Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling because I grew up in Chesapeake, Virginia. And I remember watching those guys and, thinking, how, I was all enthused about it. And of course I was into the superheroes of the day back then were Batman and the Green Hornet and stuff like that. And as I got older and got involved in athletics, which was for me amateur wrestling, I started seeing that I was having an opportunity to build a physique because there was nobody in my family that was great big. My dad was a big man; he was 6'2", but he was a basketball player in high school, and he wasn't like a musclehead kind of guy or anything. And when I remember vividly the first time I saw guys like Ricky Steamboat and Jimmy Snuka wrestle, I said, "Oh my gosh!" I said, "This is, these guys look like athletes. They look like superhumans, and they can do all
Absolutely.
these amazing things." And it inspired me because I knew, nobody can make yourself taller. I mean, I'm 6'2", and you're not going to be 6'9" Blackjack Mulligan or 7'2" Andre the Giant, but you can make whatever you've got the best version of you if you work hard enough at it. And that's what I
Absolutely.
did. I found a place where I was comfortable when I was in my, best shape that people remember me in from 85, 86. I weighed about 242 pounds.
Oh,
And,
Yeah.
and I was in the ring with guys, like you said, that, I was bigger than Flair, but I was,
Sure.
but Nikita was, 285, 290 when him and I
Yeah.
were, starting
Oh,
our
yeah.
deal. He was humongous, and
Oh,
Animal
yeah.
and
We're going to
Hawk were,
talk about Nick too.
oh yeah,
the Road Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
and so, when you're in the ring with guys that are 30 and 40 and sometimes, 50 pounds bigger than you, the average guy on the street that watches you wrestle on television has no idea how big you really are.
Oh, sure.
And the funniest thing was always to me running into guys on the street, in a nightclub, in a restaurant, something, and they would be like, just freaked out because they thought I was a giant when they got
Yeah.
eyeball to eyeball with me, and they're looking up and they're about $175, and they're going, oh my gosh. They said, how'd you get so big? I said, no. I said, I'm always been like this. I said, you're just used to seeing me in the ring with 300-pound men.
Yeah.
And I said that,
Well,
anybody
I'm gonna
looks
chime in on
little.
that. I was actually going to chime in on that, Terry. The first time I saw you live was at the Philadelphia Civic Center. I've seen you there several times. And, you're telling everyone you're 6'2", but I got to tell you something, brother. You come across like, a guy that's 6'7", 6'8". I mean, you come off like a big guy.
Well, I was pretty good size.
Well, yeah, you sure are. But the whole Magnum thing. Back in the day, there was a Tom Selleck show called Magnum T.A. How
Yeah.
immediately did you was the comparison made to you and Tom Selleck?
Well, so I gotta go back in time here for a minute for you. So I actually broke in Portland, Oregon for Don Owens
Oh, sure.
in 1980.
Yeah.
And I had a big Olds 98 four-door car. And when whoever had the biggest car, when Andre came in town, you drove the Giant around. So I'm a rookie, 1980. I've just started, and I meet Andre the Giant for the first time. And
Oh, wow.
and he's in the territory for, I don't remember if it was for 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever, but we ride together every day, and I drive him to and from. We become friends, and then I don't see him again for, let's see, I guess about a year and a half. So I had just broke in January of 1980, and then I see him again, and then I worked 6 months in Portland for Don, and then I went to work for Joe Blanchard and in his territory there in San Antonio, there for 6 months.
Right.
And I met Mike Graham. Mike Graham had come in as a junior heavyweight champion of the world. Him and I met and hit it off like we were like brothers, like we'd known each other our entire life.
Yeah.
He went home, told his dad, he said, I got this guy you got to see. He said, we got to bring him to Florida. He is made for Florida. Go to Florida, and that's where I really start to get comfortable in my own skin a little bit and doing my thing. And after I'd been there about, I don't know, probably 8-9 months, and was really getting a lot of ring time. I mean, and when I say ring time, I mean Dusty had me out there with Brad Armstrong and or Scott McGee as my partner, and we're going 45-minute Broadways every night.
Oh, wow.
With the Royal Kangaroos. So I'm getting ring time, and I've got I've got people in my ear, mentoring me, talking to me, telling me, I got Eddie Graham, who's like a mastermind of psychology, not only talking to me about what I did, but I stand out there and watch all the matches with him, and he's telling me what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what you don't do, how you paint a picture, how you do this, how you tell the story. He's giving me a master's class in working every night. So here comes again Andre. Andre comes into town, and he hasn't seen me in a year and a half. Well, I've matured drastically because when he first saw me, I'd had 3 matches. Now I've had 500 plus matches.
Sure.
And him and I are sitting in a place called Fat Man's Barbecue down in Florida, having breakfast about like at 3 o'clock in the morning. And he looks across the table at me and he says, he said, you're destined, like you're onto something here. He said, but you need a handle. That was the word he used, like a handle, like a CB guy on the handle needed a handle. And he said, you look like that guy on TV. And I had shorter hair back then, but blonde, and the short mustache. And he said, you look like that guy, Magnum, on the show. He said, you should be Magnum TA. And he came up with it just right out of his mouth. Boom. He said, that's what you should be. So he was going Andre. Back. Yeah, Andre gave me the name. And that's Andre was going back to New York to Vince Sr. because he wanted to bring me to the WWF as Magnum TA. Wow. And as fate would have it, Ernie Ladd was also coming in and out of Florida and has been eyeballing me, and I get a call from Ernie in the middle of the night because this young fellow named Paul Orndorff, who was a top star there in Mid-South, had up and left Bill high and dry and gone to work for the WWF.
Yeah.
Right? So opened up this spot. Ernie makes a call. He said, how would you like a chance to work on top and be a star? And so before Andre could work his magic, I get the call to go to work for Bill, and I go there, and that's where I assume the name, but I don't know what the name means yet. I don't know what my character is going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is all going to be about yet, because because now I've gone from working in the middle of the card, and I mean, we'd had the tag team straps and different things like that, but I'd never worked singles, main event, anything, let alone angles and all the things that go along with it.
Sure.
So now I've been in the business a total of, 2.5 years, and I end up there in Mid-South, and with the name Magnum TA, and somebody put a rock around your neck and jump in and say, figure out how to swim.
Oh, dear Jesus. That's crazy. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned a few names there that I don't want them to go by the wayside. I want to keep those names alive and keep their history alive too. You mentioned Mike and Eddie Graham. I never met Eddie. I had the chance to meet Mike. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Neither is Eddie. Is the genius of Eddie Graham, Terry, is it overstated or is it really understated? I have heard stories about this guy being able to pull an idea out of thin air and make it magic. Was he really that good?
He was better than that.
Really?
Yeah.
What was his secret? What was his magic?
Well,
what did he know that nobody else did?
Well, he knew the formula, and the formula is simplistic, but it's about how to tell a story. And he could see in people what they were capable of, even when they weren't capable of doing it themselves. But he instilled the basics of how you tell a story, and he's the one that taught Bill Watts. Bill learned his whole game plan for the business from Eddie, and Bill was another highly intelligent man in and of himself, but he learned it from Eddie. And the thing was this: Eddie told me from the very beginning. He said, no matter how big a star you get to be, every night you go to the ring, you always reestablish who you are as if they have never seen you before ever. You
Yeah.
always stay true to what you are. And if a heel can out wrestle and out fight a babyface, then there's no reason for him to be a heel.
Sure.
No reason. No reason.
Absolutely.
If stand up toe to toe brawl, if he can just whoop your ass, then there's no need in him being a heel, because he will ultimately end up being the babyface, because he's done nothing but prove dominance, and that doesn't make a heel.
That's a great
heel.
segue. That's a really great segue. You mentioned feeling comfortable in your own skin there, you're getting a feel for who you are. So, at what point is the decision made to turn you babyface? And
Well, I was never a heel. I never worked heel one day in my life.
I know, and I was going to go there actually, because
Yes.
from what I heard, that was the initial idea, was to have you as this pretty boy looking heel.
That Jim Ross may have told you that. And
Actually, yes.
And that was Bill's idea, which he had never run by me ever.
Right.
But he would have probably tried to sell it. But Jim said, "You're crazy. Look at this guy. Why in the world would you want to do that to what he can bring to the dance in this other role?" And with all my influence of people that I had idolized, I mean, the characters that I wanted to be able to portray, like Dirty Harry was, and like John Wayne was, and like Charles Bronson, they weren't wimpy little, cutesy fancy pants guys. They were tough guys.
Right. Sure.
And they would get in situations where they had to fight back from the bottom up, but
Absolutely.
they always stayed true to a character. And that's what I dug my heels in to do, because I was honestly believe it or not, and this is, and if you really look back on me, I was really the attitude before the era.
Well, I was going to go there, Magnum, because I'm going to tell you what, you were clearly a babyface, but you were a babyface with a big chip on your shoulder and an attitude bigger than you were.
And that's why I was comfortable in that, and it wasn't a stretch, and it was because for me, because I was most of the time in there with some monster.
Yeah.
It was an easy role to play, and I'd also come from this background of fighting in bars and being a bouncer and working security and working with guys that were former SEAL Team 6 guys that taught me all kind of things when I worked in Virginia Beach. And I had this package that on the surface people didn't really know, but where I was eventually going to take this whole thing would have blown everybody's mind if it had all gotten to play out. But that's why it was so calculated, the way things unfolded and the way things were happening.
Terry, we got a question from our resident filmmaker. This gentleman is an actor, director, producer, writer. He shared the screen with Meryl Streep, Sybil Shepherd, Wesley Snipes. His name is Mike Messier, and he's got a question for you.
Hi, Magnum. It's great to talk to you again. We were just talking before the show started. And today I watched a match of you in Florida against Kevin Sullivan. And what came up during that match was the way that you would stand when the two wrestlers were kind of squaring off in between, a sequence of moves. You stood in a very particular way with kind of your hands clenched and almost the veins in your neck bulging out as if you were just tense and about to fight somebody. And Magnum, I remember that from, the Tully Blanchard matches, the Wahoo matches, the Flair, Nikita matches, but it's just something that seemed to be in your style from the get-go, and it really is a very realistic fight stance that I can't think of any other wrestler, even the Road Warriors or Bruiser Brody would have something so intense when you're just standing across the ring from a guy. Was that something you did naturally, or was that a deliberate thought?
No, it was the most natural thing that it just came out because I had fought my way from the bottom up in every aspect of everything that I had done to get to the point to where you saw me. When I was in the ninth grade, I couldn't do a push-up. When I was a senior in high school, I could do 100 push-ups, and I pinned everybody I wrestled in the state tournament. I was the guy, I wasn't the natural athlete. I was the guy that had to fight tooth and nail from the bottom year round, 7 days a week to get where I ultimately got to. And my mom and dad taught me that if you believed it and you could dream it and you were really willing to put in the work, you could achieve it. And
Absolutely.
I believed it, and I worked, and I pushed, and I pulled, and I fought, and I scrapped. And when I walked in that ring, I could flick a switch. I could turn it on, and it just was the most natural feeling thing for me from the get-go, from the very first match. My very first match I ever had in my whole career was with Buzz Sawyer on TV for Don Owens, and I'd only been in the ring. I'd only been in the ring and worked out one time for 2 hours.
That's nuts.
And then went on live TV.
That's insane, brother. That is absolutely crazy.
Buzz Sawyer was known for being just a tough guy, a guy that was not particularly well liked with the other wrestlers. Even the Undertaker had a bad experience. Was he rough with you, Magnum, or did the match go okay from your memory?
Because I could take care of myself any way you wanted to go. You could be easy. It could be easy, or it could not be easy. I mean, I honestly say that in the thousands of matches that I had, I never had anybody ever it was even remotely physically intimidating to me in the ring.
Amazing.
Because I was just so, as you said, I was so wired for sound that it was like the fuse was ready to go. So we're going to either work or we're going to dance, or it can go the other way. It could have gone any way you wanted it to go. It really didn't matter. I was there and ready to go and wanted to have a good time. But if you didn't want to have a good time, then we could go that way too.
Absolutely. Our next question comes from my co-host, who comes to us by way of the United States Navy, Dan the Man Sebastiano.
Magnum, how are you?
I'm doing great.
I just want to say I'm a huge fan. I'm actually from in Norfolk right now, and you are still a huge name in all the wrestling discussions out here. So it's a huge honor to talk to you.
Why don't you tell me what you did, smartass?
Oh, the guys were getting a kick researching, getting ready for the show. I happened to get in touch with the Norfolk Collegiate School, and due to a simple email, I got you added to their notable alumni page. So big name in the area. I figured it was worth it.
Well, thanks. I've got great memories there. I was part of the charter wrestling team, the very first wrestling team that they had at the school. And like I said, my senior year, our team as a whole, I think we took second or third in the state as a team, and had multiple state champions and runners-up and everything else. So it was quite an alumni.
I'm sure. Tombstone, you're back at bat, brother.
Am I up? Do I get another question?
Yes, sir.
Oh boy. Hey, Magnum, did you ever get a chance to work with Billy Jack when you were in Oregon? That's another guy I really, really was fond of.
Billy and I didn't even meet when I was in Portland, but he came to work for the Crockett's in sometime in '86 before he went to New York. And I actually did some 6-man tag team stuff with him, with Dusty and I and him, when we were trying to get him over and, push him. and he's a super guy. I mean, I just saw Billy this last year. I did a show up in in Philadelphia, at that famous arena there where they had the hardcore wrestling. And,
ECW Arena.
Yeah.
Yeah, ECW Arena, and
That was
and
my home away from home for a long time, brother.
yeah. So Billy was there, and that's the first time him and I had seen each other in 30 plus years, and we sat down and reminisced and had a good time.
Were you
Well, I
guys
tell you what,
close to
speaking
the
of-
same size, Magnum, or was Billy a little taller, a little huskier?
Billy was probably 6'4". I'd say he's 2 inches taller than me, and he probably weighed. He was a good 20 to 30 pounds bigger than me.
Right.
I'll tell you the funny story. So when I was in San Antonio, and Ray Hernandez came in from Florida, and we were both young rookies. Tom Pritchard was there, Manny Fernandez was there, Scott Casey.
Oh my God!
Tank Patton and Buck Robley, and it's just a crazy, fun place to be. And so in comes Ray, and Ray and I hit it off, and Ray has got a grocery bag literally full of performance enhancing elements. Okay. And I mean, a grocery bag, great big brown bag full too. I mean, like spilling over. And so him and I start training together, and he's showing me his super vitamins. And in a matter of weeks, all of a sudden him and I are morphing into this like craziness. And I got up to, I was like 230 when we started. And all of a sudden I'm 273, and I'm going I'm going to the moon, right? I mean, my arm hanging down by my side was 19 inches. And I've got it in my head that I'm going to be 300 pounds. I'm going to be bigger than the Road Warriors. I mean, I'm just like, I'm 22 years old, think I'm Superman. And so I walk in this dressing room in Corpus Christi, and there sits Bruiser Brody. And Brody says, "Kid, you look amazing." And he said, "Man, I can't believe how you look." Da, da, da. And then he says, "But I want to tell you something." He said, "If you become a star based on how big you are, and you have to do all this stuff to maintain that size, you're going to write your own epitaph right there."
Yeah.
Because it will kill you. And a light switch went off in my head right then and there. And I said, you know what? I'm going to find out what size I can be that I can maintain safely, and I can still wrestle 60 minutes, and I can still run, and I can still be athletic, and I can still be strong. And I found out I could maintain 240 pounds without being a roid head. And he changed he changed the whole course of my image of what I wanted to be. And I told his widow,
remarkable.
When I saw her when I got that Thesz award in Waterloo, Iowa, I told her that story, because I mean he changed the course of my thinking at a very young age in the business, and I could have just as easily gone down a path of just to be a statistic of another one with a enlarged heart and gone in their sleep,
Oh, absolutely.
And,
well, I'll tell you what,
learn the craft.
She's been on the show with us. Barbara was actually here a couple of weeks ago, and we did an episode on Bruiser. Wonderful woman. She's coming back. We also had a woman on last week who spoke very highly of you, young man. Somebody you're familiar with, Karen McDaniel, Wahoo's wife.
Ah, man, she's a sweetheart, and
she's the Karen.
What an honor to have got the opportunity to have what I consider his last big main event match.
Well, we're going to talk about that. I actually watched that today. I watched the cage match with yourself and Wahoo, and it's interesting because, like you, Wahoo was a babyface.
Right.
And wasn't very comfortable wrestling heel. In fact, Karen told us that in fact, Mike Messier, you were on the show with us,
I remember, yes.
that he hated wrestling heel because he personally, and this is interesting, and I'm going to talk about it. It's that he personally didn't like not being liked in real life. He didn't like the heat that he got from the fans in real life. Has that ever spilled over into your life where people saw you as such a baby face that they had to be with you, they had to be near you? Maybe an obsessive fan that just, for whatever reason, felt like you were like they're all.
I was so on, this meteor type ride, and in and out, and working 7 days a week, sometimes 10 and 12 different matches a week, with afternoon shows and everything. I was never in a place long enough at one time for that to be an issue. Because
Okay.
literally, I mean, I would go as many as 90 and 100 days without even taking a day off.
Yeah.
So life for me was, on the road, trying to get workouts in, making the towns, making the, trying to have the best match I could possibly have. And I was blessed to be able to main event for, the last 4 years of a career that was, just something something out of a storybook.
Yeah.
And he graduates high school in 1977, and in 1985 is selling out their hometown arena in Norfolk Scope, wrestling for the world's heavyweight title with Ric Flair. In what world does that happen? I mean,
Yeah.
things like that don't happen.
Brother, they struck a rocket to your ass and you took a ride. I mean, you took a meteoric ride. You mentioned a few names there that are actually pretty good friends of the show. Scott Casey is a dear friend of mine. Manny Fernandez, he's been on the show 2 or 3 times already. Scott has been on the show probably 3 or 4 times. Cowboy Johnny Mantell, guys like that. You worked with all these guys, but the one person we had on that spoke super highly of you and put you over to the moon was my dear friend, in fact, the woman who hooked you and I up, my friend Nicola, Baby Doll. What do you remember about Baby Doll?
She was just, she was a diamond in the rough discovery for, for the Crockett's to bring her in the role that she did. And she just had this photogenic charisma about her that was, she was the first to me, aside from Elizabeth, because I love Liz and what she did with Randy, but Baby Doll broke all the molds. I mean, here's Baby Doll, a statuesque, larger woman, athlete in high school, strong, and first off, she's just, there's just this thing that it's going to happen with Tully, and then she takes it, on her own with the Crockett's push to a whole nother level, and she just made a real mark in the history books of the business, and just per se. I mean, have you ever stood down on the floor and looked up at a steel cage? How high they really go up in the air when you're down on the floor. And she slung a solid wood folding chair over the top of that cage like she was throwing a shoe. And I'm telling you, that takes some strength.
Sure. Well,
the average person couldn't do it.
Sure. I know Dan the Man is chomping at the bit to ask you about the Tully Blanchard I Quit match. So go ahead, Dan. Stop squirming.
Man, is it that obvious? I mentioned being a big fan. One of the tapes I wore out when I was younger was the best of, and it had you and Tully on it. I was hoping you could expand on, you talked about the meteoric rise, and you talked about how relatively new the Magnum TA character was. How does that conversation go? Somebody, maybe new's not the best word, but somebody in your position to be put in a feud with the Horseman. How does that conversation come about?
Well, I mean, the deal was this. I mean, I was being pushed for the world title. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that was the goal. That was the plan. I was 27 years old. They wanted me to be, at that time, like the youngest world's heavyweight champion. And because Flair's 10 years older than I am, and believe this or not, the Crockett's back in 1985 thought that he was too old to be representing wrestling as the world's heavyweight champion.
In 85?
Little
in
did
85.
they know.
In 85.
Yeah, in 85. They wanted Rick around. They wanted Rick in the game, but they wanted Rick to be like a Jack Nicklaus type figure, and they wanted
like
a youth movement. Yeah,
Kind of the elder statesman.
Seriously, yeah, well, that's seriously, and for whatever reason, that was their thought process.
Yeah.
So I was brought in with that in mind from the get-go, and that's why when we got on the Superstation, the very first thing they did was let Rick and I go all around the Horn, and we wrestled an hour Broadway, all the way in every major city across the United States. He and I wrestled 19-hour Broadways in 1 month.
Terry, stop there for just a second. I want you to give some idea to people of what it's like to go an hour Broadway 15, 20 days in a row with a guy that's got the stamina of someone like Ric Flair who can just go. Give us a little insight into what that's like.
Well, if you're not worth your mustard, you would find out very quickly, because you've got to be able to dance the dance and keep up with the man. And it's funny. So, I mean, in the Crockett world, in the NWA, I have this battle feud with Wahoo that concludes with me winning the title. I do this round the world loop with Rick to establish that we, the NWA, are a fighting sports commodity, unlike what we were competing against at the time with the WWE.
Yeah.
You got Hogan coming out, with a 20-minute entrance and exit in a 5-minute match. And we're right up the street in another sold-out building going an hour. So we were trying to paint the picture and tell the story that we were competitive, hard-hitting, brutal combat sport wrestling. They were entertainment wrestling. Two different worlds. And with Rick, it was honestly, for me, it wasn't a hard thing. It was an education thing. I was learning from him, just like I did wrestling with Mr. Wrestling 2, with Ted DiBiase, with Ernie Ladd, with Hacksaw Butch Reed. I was always learning from every single body I could soak it up like a sponge with, because I knew one day that I would be the guy leading the dance, not following the dance. And to lead the dance, you've got to be able to do it all. And you've got to be able to do it with anybody. And that's what the world's champion had to be able to do, because you had to be able to go and wrestle anybody's champion and tell the story, come out of there still the world champion, but make that other person in the process to where it was a win-win for everybody. You brought everybody stock up when you came to town. And that's what I was honing my craft to be able to, I mean, they weren't looking for me to be a 2-week wonder. They were looking for me to have a 2-year run. with the
Right.
belt, and then be in programs back and forth with it. So it was what I was working towards, and the test of that was my program with Nikita. So
Yeah.
with Nikita was the first time that I was the veteran. I was the leader. He had a great leader on the outside in Ivan, but Ivan could
Yeah.
only do so much from the side.
Sure.
And so for me, the measuring stick, which nobody understood, of course, on the outside, because this was before kayfabe was broke.
Yeah.
But they see me in the battle with the evil Russian. But for me, that was my graduate course of saying, "Yep, I'm ready."
Yeah,
Because Nick and I
absolutely.
were going out there and going 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and tearing the house down. And I was leading
Absolutely.
those matches, and I was leading those matches. I was generaling the matches, and I felt comfortable in that role. And that's
Yeah.
when I knew I was ready.
Got a question for you, then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Messier. How influential was Dusty Rhodes in your development?
In my development, in that when I was in Florida, he and I traveled together every day. And so
Okay.
he talked to me about the visions and the big productions and the things. And, it was like riding around with Cecil B. DeMille's. I mean, he was just this bigger than life character. But he didn't talk to me about philosophy. He talked to me about angles and
Yeah.
things that we could do and things we'd cook up to do. But what Dusty did that was such a blessing for me was teaming me up with Scotty McGee and Brad Armstrong and letting us have these runs with the tag titles where we had all this time to put in matches. And Don Kent and his partner, who I can't remember for the life of me right now,
Roy Heffernan.
yes, they taught me. I used to make Scotty so mad because I loved selling. Selling is much harder work than shining. Shining's easy. You stand there,
Yeah.
everybody flies around for you, makes you like $1,000,000. But
Yeah.
to sell and not die means you have to be fighting back all the time. You're always fighting
Absolutely.
from the bottom up. And and he and I would have tag matches. Then we'd go in and do our little deal and be shining for 10 minutes. And then they'd set the heat on me and I would never tag out. I would sell for 30 minutes because I loved the fight from the bottom up. And that's what Eddie taught me. So there's a difference in registering, in selling, and in dying. You register something and it has a certain amount of effect. You sell something and they see it, they can feel it, you pantomime it off. If you die, you're dead and there's no comeback. And he taught me how to do that. And that is what Dusty gave me the platform to put those hours in the ring to perfect that. So when I got the opportunity to work
Yeah.
the main event angles and go to Mid-South and be in the matches with Butch Reed and Jim Duggan and I were tag partners and
Right.
all the hosts of characters there, Ernie Ladd, all these guys, I knew how to fight from the bottom up. And I
Sure.
could make those people feel like they were in the fight with me. And that was the thing. It made it all personal. We had interviews directly looking at the camera. We
Yeah.
talked to you. We made you feel like you were our family, our blood. And then when you came and you got involved in the struggle with us and you wanted to see us overcome, and when we did, we all celebrated together. It was just a whole different era. It was magic that
When
I
did that
don't
all
know that you could ever
disappear?
recreate.
When did it all disappear? Why is that no longer a factor? Why is it no longer considered a part of the overall product? It seems to, at least in my opinion, and Dan and I have had this debate, Terry, is that it seems just like mindless action, spot after spot. There's no longer the detail to psychology or having the people buy into the realism of what you're doing. When did we lose that?
Progress. We lost it with progress. So we lost it with people like Turner Broadcasting when I sat in a boardroom in the North Tower with all these people from these different networks talking about wrestling, and they said, it's so dark. They said, it's just so dark. Well, when they were saying dark, they meant literally it's dark. They didn't like a building that had a spotlight on little insect-looking people down inside of a ring with a big arena where it was all blacked out, and you're doing this pantomime in the round that they didn't understand. They wanted to light the buildings up so you could see the fans, to make the fans' interaction, take the focus off the interaction in the ring. Take away the personalized interviews where you looked into that camera. When that red light came on, I was staring lightning bolts through that camera. I would daring somebody to get off their seat and not pay attention to what I had to say. I mean, that was what we had the opportunity to do. Today, they're looking off into space, and they're standing in the middle of the ring, and they're trying to, they're trying to make their own something somebody's writing for them, because the art of doing a promo has somehow become, something unobtainable. You're not supposed to be able to have your free will of saying what comes across your mind, or be creative, or be anything.
Oh, well, brother, I'm going to tell you what, that we had that debate on our last show, the lost art of the promo, and writers versus bookers. And well, I know Mike Messier's chomping at the bit now to ask a question. Go ahead, Mikey.
Magnum, going back to your Mid-South days, you and Mr. Wrestling 2 had an angle that was really ahead of its time. You were kind of the protege. Mr. Wrestling 2, with that famous white mask and the black trim, was your mentor. You guys had a feud with the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette for the Mid-South Tag Team titles. And eventually, 2 got very aggressive with his mentoring. I think he even slapped you across the face, tried to waken you up. Eventually, Mr. Wrestling 2 beat Junkyard Dog for the singles championship in Mid-South. And then you were off and running, challenging Mr. Wrestling 2 as the babyface against 2, who was the heel, which was kind of new for Mr. Wrestling 2 to be the heel. And it was just reading about that feud in the Pro Wrestling Illustrateds and the Sports Review Wrestlings at the time. It was really a fascinating storyline to follow. Can you tell us about some of the emotions or the emotional arcs, and how you got the fans emotionally invested in that teacher versus student relationship, with the ultimate payoff of you defeating him for the title?
Yeah, and Bill Dundee was the mastermind for that. So I'm going to give him credit where credit's due. He foresaw what that could be, how that could be done. And it was a story that other people have portrayed, other people have done, but never with somebody like Wrestling 2, who had never been a heel, and who had never even, thought about being a heel. He'd just been a babyface forever, right?
Right.
So the thing that happened was that, he's supposed to be, like helping coach me and teach me and bring me along, and we're tag team partners, and then we're the tag team champions, and then we get into this feud with the Midnight Express, that that all these things keep happening, that I keep coming up on the short end of the stick because Wrestling 2. Something happens to him, and I bear the brunt of all the problem. We had the lash matches, and I end up taking all the lashes, because Wrestling 2, something happens to him, and he can't, we get screwed in the match. We got to take the lashes, and he walks off or something. I end up taking all of them, right? Or the deal where I got tarred and feathered, and which was a whole nother, we could talk for an hour about that whole angle. But no, seriously, Irish McNeil's Boys Club, where we film in dead of winter, what a rib. The hot water heater goes out, and I have got to wash off molasses from head to toe before I can even think about driving back home. It turned blue. Jim Neidhart stood in the shower making sure that I didn't like hyperventilate and fall out. But all that to say, two went on this journey that he'd never been on, and he'd always been the fan favorite and everything. And the angle was that I got made the number one contender for the North American title, which drove him insane, and that's what pushed him over the edge. And then he turns full blown heel on JYD in New Orleans downtown building, and oh my goodness, that's just where you want to turn heel on the dog. Oh boy, oh yeah, you just think you're a bad man if you want to try to get out of that crowd. And who that think they're going to beat that dog? Man, those people were live. Those people were serious about JYD.
Oh yeah.
And so when two turned on him, he had the belt. I chased him for the belt. I finally beat him for the belt. It was a struggle in a lot of ways, not because of anything other than the fact that Johnny just had never been a heel, and he didn't get it. He didn't get the fact that all of a sudden, he's Mr. Wrestling. He's supposed to be able to out wrestle everybody, but he couldn't out wrestle me. And he couldn't wrap his head around that. And unfortunately, he finally got it. He really got it and turned into a really good heel, but it was too late, and Bill was pissed and pulled the plug on it.
Amazing.
And I was already, and I had the belt. I mean, he was like, we were in a feud back and forth, and Bill just killed it, put me in an angle with Ernie, and boom, it was over. But
incredible.
Johnny was an incredible worker, because to work under a mask and be able to pantomime the things that he could do was genius. I mean,
it's
four guys under a mask is a whole different game.
Yeah, I was just actually going to go there. When you're covered up like that, it's got to be incredibly difficult to show your emotions when people can't see you. They can't see your eyes squinting. They can't see your face writhing in pain. It's got to be incredibly difficult to be able to pull that off effectively. Unfortunately, as you pointed out, by the time he was able to do that, because I'm familiar with Johnny Walker, very familiar with him, it was too late, and I don't think he ever recovered after that. To be honest with you, Terry.
No, he didn't, and it's kind of sad because he was a talent and left an amazing history in the business. And I remember him coming to Atlanta when we were on fire. I mean, we were just on fire. And he came and talked to Dusty, and he came down to TBS where, down at the studio, and was trying to get Dusty to, work, let us, work that angle, again somehow, like on a national level. And of course that ship had sailed, so, was way far beyond that ever happening again. I felt bad for him because it was like, he probably could have had another strong 5 years in the business as a heel.
Yeah. Oh, that's
had
sure.
another good run. And
absolutely,
I hate it because I really have a lot of respect for the man, and we both went through quite a journey together.
Oh,
because he couldn't get it at first. He just couldn't get it. And Bill Dundee, to his credit, Bill wouldn't let it go, because Bill and I traveled together, and Bill would tell me, he's not doing this right. You've got to be in command of this part of the match, this deal, how you got to get over. Bill had me so mad one time after the match, I went all the way across the building, or it was at Shreveport, and went across the building. Two was in the shower, and Two used to wear his mask into the shower because he never wanted anybody to see him without his mask.
Yeah.
And I ripped that daggone shower curtain off, and he thought I was going to kill him. I was so mad about, just the fact that we missed this huge opportunity because he just didn't get it. He didn't get it. But he did. He finally got it.
Tombstone Jesus, you're up.
Awesome. Hey, I got another question for you, Magnum. So, I mean, just starting out, you mentioned your first match was on TV with Buzz Sawyer. And like 2 days later, you're driving around in a car with Andre the Giant. Was it basically everyone set eyes on you and said, kid, you're on your way? And how long in your career before you got a strap, be it a tag belt or what? How soon was that in your career?
I didn't have any kind of title until I got to Florida. I mean, this is how. So when I came there, Buzz is the one that got me in the door, right? Buzz told Don that I had been working. I'd been working down in Mid-South for Bill, like underneath. And Don never picked up the call and asked Bill, never said a word, anything. So
he lied.
Again, yeah, he lied. And so, I'm working, I had that match with him. And then I go to work the next night. I don't even have a pair of boots. Moose Morowski gave me a pair of boots. He was about a size 13 and I was 11 and a half. And them big clodhopper boots that and God bless him, thank him for doing it. I mean, so he, gave me my first pair of boots. And I mean, I was just flying by the seat of my pants. The Barbarian had just broke in. He was Tonga John, and him and I were about to kill each other because we were both as, I mean, you can't even imagine how to spell stiff with the two of us out there trying to work it all out and figure it all out. And
oh shit!
But the thing of it was, the first time they put me in front of a camera and put a microphone in front of me, I was completely at home. I never had a fear of the camera or expressing myself or anything like that. So that was the thing. I was just at home speaking, and the rest of it was just trying to learn the mechanics of how do you do this without killing yourself or somebody else in the process.
Oh, sure.
Well, I got to tell you, man, I truly believe you could have done anything you wanted. Gone to be an actor, whatever. As a kid, I mean, you guys brought up Magnum T.A. Hey, that guy was a pussy to me because of Magnum TA. So,
exactly.
Guys like Magnum TA made it so I couldn't watch TV because those guys were pussies,
Well, I'll tell you guys a story. So my grand plan was I wanted the world title, wanted my run, and I was going to retire from wrestling at 30.
Oh.
I didn't want to wrestle past 30 because I'd had the opportunity to drive the Copenhagen car that Benny Parsons drove for U.S. Tobacco at the Charlotte Motor Speedway.
Wow.
And it was the biggest rush of my entire life ever.
Wow.
Ever. Anything I've ever physically been able to do was drive that car. I got to drive it with nobody in it but me, and 2 hot laps around Charlotte Motor Speedway. And 3 months later, I'm sitting on a plane, and this guy walks by, and he's got all these cool conchas on his belt. I'm trying to figure out where dusting air up in first class. And he's got a cowboy hat on, and he sits down next to me, and I'm looking at him. He's looking at me. And it was Hal Needham.
Oh, Hal Needham. Holy shit.
Yeah, Hal Needham. Yeah, you remember that guy that was smoking the bandit deal and everything, right?
For people who don't know who Hal Needham is, he is a director and producer. He gave us Smokey and the Bandit. He gave us Cannonball Run. He gave us Hooper. He gave us a shitload of movies starring Burt Reynolds and Jerry Reed. And what a hell of an action director.
So he and I talked for 3 hours flying from somewhere on the East Coast to the West Coast, and we become buds. And there is him and Burt Convey owned the Skull Bandit car, and he knew about me driving it and had heard the story because it wasn't supposed to happen. It was supposed to be a cutaway in this thing, and it made it look like I was driving it, but I wasn't driving it. But Benny and I got to be buddies. And when we got to that part of the scene, he told me to push the clutch in. He fires the thing off and says, "Take off. It's just a regular 4-speed." And I did. So anyway, so Hal says to me, he said, "I tell you what, he said, if you really like this racing thing, he said, there's this race going on that they do every year in Mexico down between 3 cities. And he said, I'm going to have a car brought down for me. I'll have them bring 2. You and you just follow me, and we'll come in 1 and 2 because nobody's going to have 200-mile-an-hour cars but us. And then if you want, we'll send you to Buddy Baker's driving school, and you can drive NASCAR, because this was before they had these young new guns in NASCAR, and NASCAR and wrestling were the same group of people. And all they were looking at was dollar signs. They said, here we got this guy who's here in the wrestling world, and by God, he wants to drive NASCAR. And that was the plan. That was where Dusty was about to lose his mind. Jim Crockett was about to have a coronary.
That's crazy, brother. That's crazy.
So
let me ask you a question.
The rest of the story.
Let me ask you a question. Jim Crockett Promotions, arguably, a tried and true, at heart, Southern-based wrestling company. Why did you guys translate so well up in Baltimore and Philadelphia? Places
because we fought.
Before that.
Yeah, we fought. No, it's because we fought. Philadelphia wanted to see a fight. Baltimore wanted to see a fight. They didn't want to see a bunch of, hoopla, BS crap. If they believed that there was one match on the card that was a shoot, that was a real by God fight, that's what they wanted to see. And Tully and I gave them that. Rick and I gave them that. Nikki and I gave them that. Dusty was just the master, rope-a-dope king. And can talk all the smack and the trash that everybody wanted. So we were blood and guts and violence, and it translated well into all the major cities across the country.
Incredible. Mike Messier, go ahead.
Magnum, I'm going to bring up probably the most obscure question I can.
Leave it to Mikey.
The Omni Thanksgiving Tag Team Tournament, November 24th, Thanksgiving night, 1983. From the record that I'm looking at, you tag teamed. Was it with Randy Savage or Lanny Poffo, and got all the way to the finals?
The Macho Man. No, it was Randy and I.
You and Randy Savage were a tag team for a one-night tournament and ended up in the finals. Just to read the results of this tournament real quick, you beat the Mongolians in the first round. You took on the Bruise Brothers in the semifinals and beat them. And then you ended up against a really interesting tag team of Butch Reed and Pistol Pez Watley. And for those that don't know, before there was a Starrcade, there was this Thanksgiving night Omni Tag Team Tournament in Atlanta. And somehow Randy Savage, the Macho Man, and Magnum TA were a tag team. Can you tell us about that evening?
It was really cool. So, Dog and Butch and I get on a private plane, and they fly us to Atlanta, and Bill just said, hey, they want you guys for this match, da da da. And at the time, I don't remember if I was a North American heavyweight champion then, or in between being the champion or whatever, but it was like everybody was all wigged out about, who was going to do what and all this stuff. And to me, the business is just business. We weren't out there. This wasn't WrestleMania. This was, it was a big show, but everybody was all freaked out about, like, who's going to put who over? And I think I put Pez over in the match, and I was glad to do it. So many guys have done favors for me, and I've done favors for other people, and it's the craft, it's the deal. But everybody I remember it so well because everybody was like, I guess I could look kind of intimidating sometime, and how intense Randy was.
Oh God, yeah.
I don't even. Yeah, so it was like, nobody wanted to even come in the room and say what they wanted to do in the end of the match. because they thought something horrible was going to happen. and I didn't even blink. They said we need to try to get Pez is this, that, and the other, and he worked in Georgia Championship Wrestling. I said, man, Pez needs to go over because he's here. This is where he makes his flipping bread and butter. I said, I'll put him over. There's no problem at all. And like everybody was like dumbfounded. And we just went out and had the match, did our deal, and came home, and everybody went on about their business. And I never I laughed about it later, and I actually saw Randy and him, and I laughed about it one time too, because everybody was so just weird about politics.
Well, let's pick up on that. What is it about today's wrestling? I guess I'd say today, maybe the last 10, 15 years, where guys just don't want to do the favor. But everybody wants to get himself over. I get it, okay? And if you're good at what you do, you'll get yourself over. But why?
Well, the thing of it is that the 1, 2, 3 doesn't make people remember the match. It's the story you tell from the time the bell rings till it's over with. I could have done a job every stinking night and done it the way you should as a baby face and had everybody just dying for me to come back the next time and beat that son of a gun that screwed me out of whatever. That's just part of telling the story. It's the chase for the quest that sells tickets. Once you've achieved the quest, then you've got to somehow get screwed out of it, get challenged, get something, because nobody comes to a place to see their champion get beat. That isn't, you can't do that. It just doesn't make sense. And that's why, as a world champion, you've got to be able to do so many versatile things, because you're going to have the belt for a good bit, and you've got to do, and that's why Flair did so many 60 minutes around the globe, because he'd go to different places and he's representing the NWA, and they're telling him, you're either going over or you got to do the 60 because you can't do a job.
Yeah. Sure.
And so, there you go. Or you work a program where you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to come back in a 2 out of 3 fall, or a 90-minute match, or just all the different things you do. But as soon as we gobbled up all the territories, then they started losing those opportunities of doing all these creative things in different places.
Yeah, Terry, Dan's got a question for you about writers versus bookers. Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to ask, like Angela mentioned, we had talked previously about the difference between, or the importance of bookers versus writers. In your experience with the modern product being so heavily scripted, how to word this properly? How would you have handled the talent you worked with back then, have handled that attempt to basically hand you a script? This is your promo. This is your match. You're starting with this. You're starting with that. And wrestling evolved away from wrestling, and it's a stunt show now. It's an scripted action stunt show. How would the crew you worked with back then have handled an attempt to do that?
Not too well. Not too well. The spontaneity is like, can you imagine had, the perfect weapon that chair broke into to paint that death-defying picture that people see of me standing over Tully when I let him live, and when they thought I was going to gouge that spike through his head. You couldn't script that.
Right.
Exactly.
We didn't even know what we were going to use for a gimmick. In the end, that wasn't anymore. She was just looking for something. We knew we were going to have a foreign object. That's all we knew. We had no idea that we were end up, with this historic event, when all that took place. And if you take away the spontaneity, then you take away the creativity, you take away your ability to adapt to the crowd being different in one place than it is in another. You kill the craft of the storytelling. and there's people there that can still do it. I mean, there are there. I mean, for instance, I mean Ricochet. Ricochet, you'd say, oh my gosh, he's just a high flyer spot guy. I've watched him work a match where he didn't do one high flying thing the entire match.
Exactly.
And can work a hold and tell a story and do spots that make sense and sell things like they make sense and do it all. So there's people that can do it. It's just that the television commodity that they produce dictates that if they don't know every camera angle they need to catch it live, they can't produce the product they're accustomed to producing. That's the difference, because I've sat and watched a live recording of WWE programming and saw something that seemed so flat and so lackluster and just like what I would call in the building a C match. Gone back and watched it recorded with all the zoom ins and the camera angles and everything that they did when they shot it. And it was like the difference in sitting on a movie set and only seeing things from one perspective and then sitting in the movie theater and seeing the final product. So that's how much it's evolved and changed.
Interesting segue. Terry, we have a guy, actually we have two guys on the show tonight that are associated with one particular gentleman. I'm going to segue into this. Mike Messier is a very dear friend and a frequent guest of Vince Russo's The Brand. He's good friends with Vince. He knows Vince Russo very well. Our friend Tombstone Jesus has been the recipient of Vince Russo's writing. Now, I have said on the show before, I've been on Vince Russo's network, but I have never met Vince Russo. I've never had a conversation with him. I've been on other programs on his network. What do you think of Vince Russo, Terry, as a wrestling personality? And be honest with me.
This is how much a dinosaur I am. I know the name. I wouldn't know him if I ran into him. I don't know what he's produced. I don't know anything about him other than the fact that I know he had something to do with the WWE when they were.
He gave us the Attitude Era.
Okay, well then, if he gave us the Attitude Era, he's got some talent, because that was the best thing that I've ever seen them produce. So he must be a smart man.
Well, interestingly enough, and I know Mike Messier is going to chime in on this one, there was a book written called The Death of WCW, which featured Vince Russo's photo on the cover prominently. Mikey, take it from there.
Well, I mean, I think that was Brian Alvarez's book, if I'm not mistaken.
It was.
And Brian really contended that when Vince Russo, who was kind of a high-profile writer for the WWF during the Attitude Era, Magnum, he came over to WCW, I think, in late 1999, kind of made himself an on-screen character as well, did a lot of stuff that was breaking the fourth wall. Probably, surprisingly, Angelo, even more so than for my personal tastes. But Vince Russo actually wrote himself to win the WCW World Championship, and at a time when the title was really, they had David Arquette, the actor, win it. They had the title kind of get vacated through a Jeff Jarrett, Hulk Hogan work shoot thing gone awry. I guess what there would lead me, Magnum, is more to the fact that after the tragic car accident that we all know about in I believe the actual date was October 13th, 1986, if I have that off the top of my head. But you ended up you ended up behind the scenes a bit with Dusty, and I remember that you did some commentary work. I remember being at the Starrcade 1991 in the Norfolk Scope, and I believe you were there in a tuxedo with Eric Bischoff and Missy Hyatt. And one of the things about your career and wrestling journey that people don't talk about, that maybe we can bring up here, is that you had several years where you were behind the scenes WCW, kind of in that transitional time from the Crockett's to the Turner people.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to talk about? Us, just kind of an open-ended question, but your time behind the scenes, working with the Bischoffs, the Dustys, the Missy Hyatts, all those interesting characters that you worked with.
It was a great education to corporate America, to big business side, and it was TBS. And Crockett's were gone; they'd sold it to Turner at that point in time, and so I had I had a short run during the Jim Herd days, and then and had his secretary call me and say they no longer required my services, only to have to call me back about a year later and rehire me because Dusty they called Dusty to be the booker, and Dusty said, yeah, I'll be the booker, but Magnum's going to be my right hand. And so then there had to be some crow eating and readjusting of things, and they had to bring me back. And then I saw Herd shown the door shortly thereafter, and went through the Kip Fry era and then the Bill Watts era of that deal. And to be honest, it was painful time for me because I was doing only thing I knew how to do, trying to adapt in a world that I had, invested my every ounce of energy in.
Yeah.
And then trying to find my way back into something that I could get some satisfaction from. And so now I'm only 28, 29 years old, and, should have been, in my prime doing my thing. And I'm having to sit on the sidelines and talk about it, and also work with the talent and negotiate contracts and take care of disciplinary actions with people when they're getting out of line with their corporate responsibilities and their contractual responsibilities. And it was not a time that I have fond memories of because it was painful.
Yeah.
A reminder of what I couldn't do, even though I had defied the odds and 1,000,000 to 1 odds I was told that I would ever walk again, which was a miracle and a huge thing. I couldn't find my way in that world to make it all make sense in my head when I had people around me that had changed their whole way of thinking. I came from an era of you produced, you drew a house, you were on the main event, and you got a percentage of that gate by what you had drawn. And I was now in a world of a payroll of $9 million for wrestling talent that was guaranteed mailbox money they got every 2 weeks, whether they flip-flop, flew, drew a dime, did anything spectacular or not. And you couldn't have the same conversations with athletes in that mindset that you could a couple of years prior to when I was, in my heyday of what I was doing. And that evolution is part of what undid the true inspiration of what drove guys to giving world-class performances. And to the matter of the belt, let me just say this about that real quick. The minute the 10 pounds of gold got retired and the big belt was made, the world's championship, as it was known all the way back to Ed Strangler Lewis and all the days, ceased to exist. It quit that day because then it became a corporate-owned belt and something that didn't have to pay homage to the NWA, the oldest governing body in professional wrestling, or the heritage that was laid out by all the men, the Harley Races, the Dory and Terry Funks, that list of people. There was a handful of people over 20 years that wore that belt. They were all voted on. They were all had the support of all the members of the NWA prior to receiving that belt and that opportunity to represent everybody in the NWA. And when that all changed, that day, it went from being what it was to what it evolved to.
Yeah. We're going to do our last round of questions. I'll start off. And where you left off was a great segue for this question. What do you think of the new resurgence of the NWA with Mr. I think Billy Corgan? I believe that's his name.
I love Billy. I did a couple things with them when they did the Crockett tournament thing they did a couple years ago here in the Carolinas. Nikita and I did a thing for them, and I'm glad that there's someone there keeping the name of it alive, because it deserves to be alive. But I can't. There's always been things that have been, a little off color in, wrestling, things that we had along with the hardcore things that we did. We had right. I mean, Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant, who I love to death.
Oh, we love Jimmy. He's a good friend of the show.
And Jimmy and superstar Billy Graham could go out there on a card where Tully and I were all but, just literally killing each other, because we had an 8-month program up to that I Quit match. That were hundreds of matches equally as violent or more violent than what everybody remembers in the I Quit match. Yeah. So on that same card could be Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham, and they could, do some funny stuff and do different things, and it didn't take away from the intensity of what we did, right? So they could exist in the same world. But the world of what the NWA has tried to do, with people trying to be, stand-up comics in the middle of something that you're trying to tell a story with, things that just I can't wrap my head around.
I'm with you, brother. I am.
I want to see it work, and of course it could never. You can't turn the clock back, and it can't be, what this thing once was. But there's still got to be a mainstream, steady storyline thing there in the middle of all of it that makes sense. And I told somebody, so if I would have been Billy Corgan and had his influence, I would have been trying to do something to have my NWA World Champion working in accordance with all the organizations around the country, even the WWE, all of them, to have my champion going around and working in all these other venues to make it really mean something. If you're the champion of a group of 15 people, what exactly are you the champion of?
Exactly.
It's got to appear that you're the champion of 500 plus people that are all aspiring to want what you have. And they can't anymore paint that picture than any of these other, people that are trying really hard to have, wrestling programs, and it looks, it looks just amateurish.
Yeah, it sure does.
And it's, and I hate it. I hate it for them, because to me, walking out in front of a crowd of 8,000 to 10,000 people that are like on fire and electric is like the biggest rush in the world. Doesn't have to be 70,000. Doesn't have to be that, but 8,000 to 10,000 people that really want to see what you're doing and hanging on every move and every word is like as good as it gets. And these guys just don't get that opportunity. And I'm sorry, because I'd love to see the NWA, have that kind of opportunity.
Well, speaking of opportunities, let's talk about a young lady you must be very proud of, Thesz.
Oh,
talk about opportunity, taking the opportunity and running with it.
Yeah, and she's got all the right stuff. She's got that intangible thing that you can't buy, you can't even earn. You got to have it. You've got to have the it factor, and then you can sprinkle in the look and the physique and the ring skills and the mic skills. But if you don't have the it thing, you're not going to go but so far. And she had it from the very beginning, and she's worked her rear end off. And I'm one of her biggest fans, and I'm waiting for the day that she has the opportunity to get on a stage befitting the true talent that she has the potential to be, so she can take herself to the next level and get in that fishbowl, with all the big players.
If my opinion matters for anything, and I hope it does, because I'm your friend and your buddy. If my opinion matters, in my opinion, keep her the hell away from WWE at all costs.
Well, that's not.
They will kill her career.
Yeah,
that poor girl won't have a career.
Yeah, that
would be
would
a side note.
Yeah, that would, and I'm not going to say never happen, because her and Ashley her and Ashley could make more money in the right setting with each other, against each other, whatever, than any two women have ever made in the sport, in the business.
Yeah.
And that's why it'll never happen. Well, don't never say never.
Well, here's you know what, and you're right. They say in wrestling, never say never. But here's my problem. When it makes sense, count on that company not to do it.
Right.
Because
I wouldn't count on that company to do it. You have to think outside the box.
Well, brother, I'm going to tell you.
I never said it was going to be under the banner of WWE, of that control. Yeah, I never said that.
Well, I'll tell you what. For both of their sakes, and I hope if Ashley Fleer has an opportunity to get the hell out, I hope to God she takes it. Just as soon as her contract is up, I hope she runs and doesn't look back. We're going to go around the horn with one final question for Magnum TA. Mikey Messier, we'll start with you. Keep it short.
Magnum, do you remember, I believe it was Crockett Cup 86, you and Ronnie Garvin teamed up, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the quarterfinal round, you guys beat Giant Baba and Tiger Mask, if I have that right. And I just... I thought it was, I'm going by memory here. There's no Wi-Fi or anything, but Magnum, do you have any memories of wrestling two guys? I'm not sure if that was Tiger Mask 1 or 2 and Baba, who was a legit 7 feet tall. Just just the mechanics of working with guys who didn't speak English as a first language.
Well, how about this? We didn't see each other. There was no back room to, go over and say hi. I've never met either one of them in my life. Ronnie and I, it was supposed to be Dusty and I. We switched it all up at the last minute, made it Ronnie and I in the tournament. And Dusty says, I got this great idea. And I said, what's that? He said, you know that Tiger Mask guy, he likes to fly off the top rope. He said, let him fly off the top rope, catch him and belly to belly him. I said, okay, sure, sounds great. I don't know whether he weighs, $175 or 250, but Dusty said, go do it. I'm going to catch him when he comes off the top rope and belly to belly him. And I did. And that's the way we rolled back then. That's the way
it made a great photograph. I remember that photograph of that exact moment. But it just fascinated me, that match in particular. Then, of course, you guys went on to face the Road Warriors. And it seemed to be like a great time, the Crockett Cup in New Orleans, the first one.
Oh, it was absolutely nuts. And it was kind of funny, because it was like I'd wrestled in that building for Bill Watts, I don't know how many times, when I was in Mid-South, because I was there for a year and a half, and we were on fire. And when I left Bill, the territory was on fire. they were smoking. I was in the program with Ernie for I dropped the North American title to him, and when I gave my notice, here I'm his top babyface. I gave him a notice that I'm going to go to work for the Crockett's, who at the time were on their rear ends. The boys were making a fifth of what I was making working for him. I worked a 6-week notice for Bill, and I had to hear about it during our team meeting before TV for 6 weeks.
Oh my
God.
God.
It was brutal. Yeah. And I mean, and it was in some jest, but Bill's a type A personality kind of guy. To come back as a bigger star than I'd ever been for Bill, into the Superdome was kind of a, I wasn't quite so crazy, was I, Bill?
Right.
Moment,
Terry,
but it was special.
In answering Mike's question, you prompted me to remember something I watched today. I spent the afternoon watching a lot of matches. I watched, of course, Tombstone Jesus for quite a while, our friend here, and I watched a lot of Magnum TA, and I noticed something that I never noticed before, and I want to ask you about it. When you did your belly-to-belly suplex, it always came from the left. What's the deal with that?
So that was a shoot move, okay? So it wasn't a work. So okay. I figured out early on by happenstance that I could do that move to anybody, whether they were 250, 300, 350, it didn't matter. I could do it to anybody. And I remembered it. I said, if I ever get a break and I ever get to be a star somewhere, I'm going to use that move, because you don't want somebody to be able to screw your finish up.
Sure.
And so, I always took them to the left, because that's where, they could go with it, not go with it, jump, not jump. It didn't matter. They were going to go. And that's the way.
Well, I was going to ask you if you ever had like anybody try to resist going to the left and try to swerve you to the right.
One time, and it's on a video, and it wasn't a swerve. It was an accident. But Barry Darso went to go to the right, and I had caught him, and he was about 290, and he jumped and he went right. And I turned his momentum in the air and turned him back and went to the left. And he went on a whirlwind of a ride. And it's on a video that
I got to check
together.
That one
out. And it's that one where they did a video. I think it was to My Way or something, Frank Sinatra song. And it's in that video. And you watch and you'll see him. He jumps to the right, and he is in full swing. And I catch him, and I spin him, and I turn him back to the left, because I couldn't do it any other way.
I got to check that one out. Dan the Man, one final question from Magnum TA.
Well, I was going to ask you about the belly-to-belly, but Angelo beat me to it. So
that's because I'm old and I'm smart.
I have to know, my previous question, you mentioned the natural flow of things, and you talked about the famous incident with the chair, how just organic that felt. I have to know, wrestling fans being simultaneously the best and worst people in the world, how often when you get questions, do you still get people who think that chair was gimmicked?
Good question, Dan.
You know what? I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever had anybody ask me that, ever.
We have the smartest panelists in all of wrestling podcasts, by the way.
Without a doubt.
Thank you. That's a really great question, Dan. I never thought to ask that. But has anybody ever broached that subject with you?
Never. Kelly and I have done many panels talking about it. And we just talked about how it was, just crazy that this thing appeared out of this chair. when it was thrown down.
That's funny.
But yeah, you couldn't have made that on a Hollywood set any better than
serious.
what that came out with.
Yeah. Tombstone Jesus, Mike Schroeder. You got the final. You had the opening question, and you got the final question.
Thank you, brother. Magnum, no one's brought it up. I got to ask you, what was it like being the heartthrob? And I say that word, I mean,
there you go.
we had, Midnight Express, the teeny boppers were going crazy. And I mean, I'm a 15, 14-year-old kid just watching this go down. And, Ric Flair, he had the ladies. It seemed like he might have paid a few of them, but he had them, But Magnum TA, you literally seen women going out of their mind in the audience, everywhere, man. And, I think you're on a level of Elvis Presley at the time. What was that like?
It was surreal.
Elvis of wrestling.
It defied logic, and that TV was so powerful that it reached so many people, and they cast me in that role, and you're right. I mean, the teeny boppers, the 8 to 13-year-olds were losing their mind over the Rock and Roll Express, and Rick was just Rick, Mr. Space Mountain. But I mean, I had the 18 to 30 group locked down pretty solid.
Dude,
I think
you had the 12 to 82-year-old group locked down. I think anything that was female was pretty much. I'd never seen anything like it since, to be honest with you, man. So it had been amazing. Did you have a girlfriend at the time?
Oh, one or two, but nobody ever survived very long because it was, I was in a different port 7 days a week, and it was impossible. It was an impossible ride to be on with anybody but yourself. Because it was just too absolutely insane. I can't really imagine other than being like you said a rock star or something like that. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere, do anything that you weren't recognized. And then when people did see you, then that's a whole nother chapter. And now that I'm a dad of twins, I can't really relay that chapter too well.
Yeah, well, we'll have to include a part 2 in this, and maybe between now and then, you can figure out between you and Mikey Messier, because he's a hell of a writer, how to edit that for broadcast.
There you go. Well,
Jerry, I want to extend a huge thank you for being with us and being so generous with your time. And I know you've got some stuff going on at home, and we wish you the best and God bless. I will call you in a couple of days to check in on you, make sure you're all right. And
sounds good, man.
Just know that you've got 4 guys here who love you. And we'll always remember that legacy, and your legacy's not over, brother. Your legacy lives through your matches, through video, through our memories, and through Thesz. And we are honored to have had you as a guest, and I hope you will join us again.
Sounds good, guys. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Magnum.
You so much. Take care. Magnum TA, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Magnum. Dream come true right here.
Interviewer. Mike Messier, your thoughts. What do you think about Magnum TA?
Well, just real quick, when I was a kid in the backseat of a car, there was a wrestler magazine.
I don't need to hear that story, Mikey.
Well, this is a PG one. But I remember picking up the copy of The Wrestler, and they had an introducing. They would have an introducing article of the young wrestlers coming up on the scene. And Terry Allen was in Florida wrestling, and he was the first wrestler I can remember being from Virginia, Chesapeake Bay, Virginia.
Yeah.
And I think they gave him at the time the weight of 243 or 245.
Yeah.
And years later, I didn't get to tell Magnum on the show, but I was at the Crockett Cup as a young kid when he came out in '87 in Baltimore. So
I'm surprised you didn't, because you and I talked about that. I'm surprised you didn't bring that up.
well, there was just so many things to talk about, but it was at a Magnum and I actually talked before the show when we were getting our lines together. But being in the arena, 13,000 fans in Baltimore, inner city wrestling, and to see Magnum TA, because like he said, they thought he may never walk again.
Yeah.
It's a long walk from the dressing room to the ring. And
Oh,
for a
yeah.
guy
You know
who,
what? It's I actually watched that today, Mike.
Yeah. And the guy,
I'll tell you what, you could see in the first, I guess the first 3 to 5 rows, just everyone, male, female, young, old, they were just all just full of tears and smiles at the same time.
we were glad he was alive.
And it even looked like Dusty got a little choked up there.
Well, the thing
when
is,
Dusty
Angelo,
brought him out.
the thing is that people saw the photograph of his Porsche that was wrapped around that damn telephone
Oh, yeah,
pole.
I've seen it.
And this was
Oh, yeah.
1986, guys.
Yeah.
This was 1980. This was not 2020 where you have all the jaws of life in every police station.
Sure.
But people were concerned that this guy was not going to live through the night.
Oh, I know.
And
I
it,
was going to say, if I remember the story, he was in the car for several hours before anybody even called law enforcement.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the problem, Dan, was that at the time he was pushing 270 or better and jacked to the gills. And the car was, I mean, if you saw it, you wonder, not only how did he get in it, but how did he get out of it? And he was there for quite a bit of time. He worked himself out to a point just about the time that, help arrived. But he was a big guy. I mean, he's still a big guy. But you're talking about a guy that's, 265, 275 and just, jacked,
Well, when people question pro wrestling, and look, whatever term you want to use, but when you talk about a guy fighting for his life,
yeah,
and coming out the other side and having family, having successful businesses,
yeah,
still being a part of the pro wrestling, and here we are 30 years later, we're still talking about this guy's career. Like he said, only lasted 6 years. That's a champion right there. So,
but I'm going to tell you what, brother, that was a full 6 years, and that was an action-packed 6 years. Yeah, Tombstone Jesus. Let's talk about it. You and I spoke privately. You said, you jumped at it when I said, come on the show with us. And
oh, hell yeah.
Oh,
hell yeah. No, I want to thank you again,
brother, look, I
like
brought you on here for a
dream come
reason.
true to me. I wrestle all over, and anybody who knows anything, I'll hear Shawn Michaels. Sometimes I get told I'm a male version of Shawn Michaels, but anybody who's been around, they say Magnum TA. And when they do, brother, let me tell you, I get the biggest smile on my face, and it couldn't be a bigger compliment, and I don't think anyone ever in the business had a rocket strapped to their ass like that deserved it, could handle it. I mean, just listening to him, everybody who laid eyes on him said, this guy's gold. And he's a badass for real.
Sure.
I mean, look at him. I mean, he said his heroes was like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. And that's what came across on the screen. Only he made those guys look like pussies.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And it's funny that and I'm glad you brought it up, Mike, because earlier in the conversation, you pointed out that, he was a manly man. He had a lot of the guys we see have, the shaved chest.
Yeah.
Magnum had hair on his chest.
Yep.
I saw a match today with you, as a matter of fact, where a guy grabbed a handful of your hair on your chest.
Yeah, and Velcro's my biggest nightmare at this point. But No, hey, when I was a kid, like I say, I was adopted. I didn't know what I'd look like, but I grew up in the 70s. Burt Reynolds, Tom Selleck, and, I just prayed to God I'd have hair on my chest. And, and again, Magnum, he was a man's man, It was like watching an old Western badass.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I mean, he was just it for me.
Yeah,
he
and
really
it's funny because I watched you wrestle, and I don't know whether, and I honestly don't. I'm pretty good at telegraphing stuff, but I honestly don't know whether this was your natural wrestling style or whether you subconsciously wrestle like him because you looked up to him so much. But you wrestle a lot like he did.
And it's because I looked up to him so much, you guys. I mean, literally, when I was a kid, I was like, that's what I want to look like. That's what I want to be like.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there was a lot of big guys with shaved chests and Hulk Hogan hair and the tan. You had the peroxide. Yeah. I mean, Buddy Rogers did it best, or Flair probably did it best. Buddy too,
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that. But when Magnum come along, and I mentioned Billy Jack too. There was another guy.
Oh yeah.
Big manly dude. Who could.
We've actually tried to get him on the show, but his phone number's disconnected right now.
Oh man.
So I can't reach him. I'm just trying to get Billy Jack to do the show, but like I said, his number's
There's an interesting man right there.
Oh, brother, let me tell you something. I got a friend of mine who interviewed Billy twice, and he's always an interesting interview because you never know who's going to show up.
That guy, man, I'll tell you, what a life, huh?
Oh, brother. Dan, you had the opportunity tonight. What do you think, kid?
Interviews like this, the reason I agreed to come on the show. I mean, when you first called me and offered me the spot at co-host, and you listed some of the names that were coming up, Magnum TA was one of the names that really jumped out at me.
Yeah.
It's
moments like this. Speaking of names, we're going to go over some names that are coming on the show. But before I do, I've got to ask Tombstone about some items behind him, and there's a big old gold shiny belt there. What is that, brother?
That's the Core Championship belt, brother.
Oh, here
That's
you go.
me. I am your GCW Core Champion. So
Congratulations.
I got AK-47 blood type, you guys. I don't age in regular years. I age in badass years.
That's great.
In mortal years, I'm going to be 50, and in badass years, I'm about 23, right in the peak of my physicality. But
now
that's it. Devotion Championship Core Champion right here, brother. Thanks for bringing
let's
it up.
talk about that for a couple of minutes, because I'm actually going to do a show with you. And I should tell everybody, Tombstone Jesus is coming back for his own show, his own segment. And we're going to explore Devotion Championship Wrestling and Vince Russo's tie to that company. But I had mentioned to you when we first got together that the understanding I was given, and again, I don't know who it came from, but the understanding I was given that this was some sort of a faith-based organization.
Yeah.
But so smarten me up. What is devotion?
You couldn't be wrong. You couldn't be further. But I could see where that would kind of come around. The name Devotion Championship Wrestling. It's people have said Devotional Championship Wrestling before.
I've actually heard that.
You got me, Tombstone Jesus. Okay. Well, I got in the business through my musical career. I'm a musician, guys. Get on YouTube, sub my channel, check out some of my music as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of what got me in the business. But I'm a wrestling fan who looked like Jesus, and people used to call me Jesus all the time. one day I was threatening to tombstone somebody in a bar, and somebody yelled out "Tombstone Jesus," and I says, "That's it. That's the name of my band. That's my wrestling name," and the rest is history on that. So
I'll tell you what, and it makes
we're
a hell
out
of a
Utah, and Utah is just, this place is just crawling with Mormons.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, you guys record your show right in the heart of Salt Lake City. You don't get more Mormon than that.
Right.
But I'll tell you what,
And
Tombstone Jesus makes a hell of a T-shirt. It's a great looking shirt.
I gotta send you one, brother. I gotta send you one.
Well,
what size?
I got something for you.
That's what I'm talking about.
And can you see that? Hold on.
I lost it in the green screen, but
put it to your chest, Angelo. Put it to your chest.
There it is.
Yeah.
Microphone. Here you go.
Hell yeah.
There you go.
So back to the religious thing. So I think being from Utah, right? And then there's one other gimmick I got to tell you guys about. Our tag team champions are the brothers Smith, and they come to the ring. They look like full-blown missionaries, Mormon missionaries, or maybe Jehovah Witnesses, right?
Right.
And it's kind of been a long story. I actually put the guys underneath my wing, and I've been training them, and they've been clanging and banging in the gym. And it took a while, but they're the champions. And so that might be another reason why people think it's kind of a religious show. But we're not pushing any.
But it's not.
Well, I'll tell you what the giveaway was for me, because I watched quite a bit of your programs today. The giveaway for me was the male versus female match. I don't know who the tattooed girl is, but she's got what's her name?
Her name's Rekka Tahaka.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she's got a feud going with this scrawny pencil neck geek kind of looking guy. And what is his name?
Porter Blake.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, boy, they're pushing the envelope in Salt Lake City, because I thought this can't be a religious organization. I don't think so.
No, we're just wrestling.
Well, yeah, but I want to tell you something, and consider this a compliment. That's a good product, and I like what I saw. I watch NXT, and I'm not crazy about what I'm watching. So I'm putting you guys over NXT.
Hey,
you got a good product. You got a real good.
Means a lot to us out here. It really does, brother.
And how'd you get hooked up with Vince Russo?
I'll tell you, Vince Russo. Let me tell you, guys. For me, what Magnum kind of said it all. But for me, guys, the Attitude Era was everything, and I was a fan my whole life. But for me, it peaked with Stone Cold and The Rock. Yeah. I mean, I'd have nitro parties, guys. Raw parties, not nitro parties. And there'd be a pile of beer cans piled up in the corner of the garage. We'd have a TV out in the garage, and I'd have a couple fuckers knocked out in them, because that's how much I got into wrestling and loved the Attitude Era. And it's, that was... to go from cartoon characters to The Godfather and, pimping and all that.
Yeah, it was
wow.
And you know what, Mike? I think that's what Magnum was getting at, that, when I asked him about, how this Southern organization played in Baltimore and Philadelphia, and he answered it perfectly, because it was a fight. People wanted to see a fight. They didn't want to see, over the top, cartoony kind of characters.
And that
Mike
was
Messier,
hard hitting. Yes.
You're friends with Vince Russo. What do you know about his association with Devotion?
I'll be honest, I don't know too much about it, but I want to hear more about it. I've heard Vince mention it. I know that one thing that Vince Russo does sometimes is he kind of categorizes things. Like when he does his brand podcasts, that's one aspect of his life.
Right.
The different shows are kind of subcategories, and the Devotion Championship Wrestling is he doesn't try to force the brand members. You have to go watch Devotion Championship Wrestling to be part of the brand. And I'm guessing, Tombstone Jesus could probably reiterate, I would guess that Vince Russo doesn't say to the wrestlers in Devotion Wrestling, hey guys, you have to go pay $3.95 a month for the brand. It's just a thing that Vince Russo, in my mind, compartmentalizes things in a way that's the way he does things, in my opinion.
Mike, how did you guys even get Russo to come to Utah, of all places?
Well, Manny Lemons owns the company Devotion Championship Wrestling.
Okay.
He wrestles all over, and he got a chance to meet Vince in Denver when Vince was working with another promotion there.
Right.
And Manny just stayed on him and stayed on him and stayed on him, and finally got Vince to come out. Vince come out and watched the show and said, you know what, you got believable characters here. You guys got some passion here. And he's willing to be a part of it. And so for me, I'm thinking, wow, here comes Vince Russo, I guess I'll wait around and see when he wants to talk to me. Or the guy couldn't be more approachable. And, as far as just for me, the guy's a genius. Okay. And I don't want to get too far into just what was going on, but he injected something into a match that was genius.
Yeah.
And it went over like you wouldn't believe. And for me, it was just like off the top of his head, something we hadn't even thought about. And that was really before he was writing the show for us and stuff.
Yeah.
And
it's funny because Dan and I and Mike the other night, when we did our special roundtable, we were talking about characters or more so the lack of characters. Right. And I know that Vince is very big into the character development. And Dan and I, we're kind of like, I'm not a Russo mark. I listen to the guy's show. Sometimes he comes up with a gem that I like, but I listen to everybody,
Sure.
But Dan and I were talking about characters and the lack thereof, and how they play out now, and whether characters can even get over anymore. Dan, you got questions for Tombstone?
Well, I'll admit, and we've talked about this before, I'm not the biggest Vince Russo fan from some of his work. However, I will give him credit. One thing we do agree on, what Angelo had mentioned, was characters. And one thing Vince Russo was always good at, even in some of the moments that I may not have agreed with, was motivation. That's when you talk about characters, it doesn't have to be Kamala the Giant or Ultimate Warrior. It doesn't have to be a character, but it has to be somebody besides John Smith, Dave, whoever, people with names that are wrestling just because there's no motivation. And be it the Attitude Era, be it some of his things in WCW that worked, and some of the products he's done since then that have been good quality, is whether you're a character or you're wrestling under I don't want to say a real name, but just a first last name kind of person.
I'm glad you said that.
If you have a drive, you have a reason. I understand why, like Magnum mentioned, I understand why you're a heel, why you're a face, why you two hate each other. Right. It doesn't have to be, I'm the best. I want to be the best wrestler. I want to be the best.
Let me tell you who the best
guys. I'm sorry, if you've got 10 guys on your roster with the same motivation and the same look and the same nonchalant, then if nobody's a character, or if everybody's the same character, then nobody's a character.
Right. Well, let me chime in here. And I think you'll all agree, and you better agree because I'll beat you all up. I think you'll all agree that I know, right? Go pumping the guns, right? I think you'll all agree that the best characters, and correct me if I'm wrong. If you think I'm wrong, tell me. The best characters in wrestling are real guys turned up a notch.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Oh, and that was Magnum right? And I don't even know if he was that turned up. That guy was just that awesome.
Right,
But
exactly.
when you seen him come to the ring, you're like, that's a real guy.
Exactly.
And he's a badass.
Yeah, he just tweaks it up a little bit. And I think that's what Russo does so well. Because remember something, we all talked about this on the show before. Vince Russo doesn't come from the wrestling world. He comes from the writing world. He's a writer. His job is to take a person, and create a character for that person. That comes from the imagination. But if you got a guy like Steve Austin, who is who he is, he's got no gimmick, black trunks, black boots. He doesn't come out with long, wavy hair. You know, a guy with a shaved head, right?
Right.
He's just himself, cranked up.
Yeah.
You know? Go ahead, Mikey.
To your point, Angelo, I'm watching Spring Stampede 2000. This is when they stripped all the champions in WCW of the belts, and they had like a one night, 3-tournament night. Ric Flair and Lex Luger are teaming up against Shane Douglas and Marcus Bagwell, and they're playing up the whole ECW, Shane Douglas and Mike Awesome, Scott Steiner, Sting, Vampiro. My point is that show is 20 years old, and I'm watching that now, and it's more cutting edge and it's more present.
Yeah.
And the storyline may not even be to my liking, which is, you know, the writers are getting sick of these old millionaires clubs and they're pushing the new blood. But there is a storyline that goes from the first match to the last match.
Sure.
And it may not be the best storyline, but you can follow it. You can follow
it's something that's missing. That here is the. Remember this, and Mikey, you know this because you're a writer.
Yes.
In writing, especially writing for television, there's something that's called a continuity director.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
The continuity director keeps the flow of the story going throughout the story.
Correct.
In wrestling, that's what Vince did in the Attitude Era to make it so successful. When they got rid of that caliber of writer and hired young kids on internship programs, they lost their continuity. Now you can have the beginning of the show with one match, ending the end of the show with another match, and nothing in between connects anything to anything.
Yeah.
Therein lies your problem. There's no continuity. And I think, Mikey, what you're saying is the reason you can watch a 20-year-old show and have it be topical is because there's continuity. Am I right?
You know, and let me just talk about one other thing. You know, Vince gets thrown under the bus for a lot of things. And just recently they had the Brawl for All, you know. So, guys, you know what a big fan I was. I told you guys. The Brawl for All started on my birthday, okay? From the very first awkward fight, me and my bros knew this shit is real. We know what a fight is, and they ain't always pretty, okay? And so we're excited because we are going to find out who the toughest guy is. And there's some tough guys in here. All right, so I'm a UFC fan. You might watch 2 or 3 UFC pay-per-views before you see anyone get their head knocked off, like Bart Gunn started knocking people's heads off. You know, and when you see Bradshaw's head spin all the way around, and Godfather's head did the same thing, and guys were falling out of the ring. Don't tell me that wasn't entertaining, because we were going nuts.
Oh, yeah.
Angelo,
Go ahead, Mikey.
On Tombstone's point, I'm actually very good friends with Vinny Pazienza, the boxer, who was the referee. Well, Vinny was the referee for the Butterbean Bart Gunn fight.
Right.
At WrestleMania 15. So what I'll in Philadelphia, Angelo. So what I'll do
I know
for the wrestling with the Wrestling with the Future with the Wrestling with the Future YouTube channel, I'll upload the interview I did with Vinny Paz so that your Wrestling with the Future YouTube family can enjoy because Paz talked about that fight and being the referee for that fight.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to hear
I would
that.
love to have Vinny Paz on the show.
I'll work on that. Paz is a great guy. He has a
Yeah.
soft spot for wrestling and
Yeah.
a soft spot for a lot of things. But
Well,
soft
I got
spot
a
for
soft
wrestling.
spot for boxing too, so
Well,
Yeah,
back
me
I'm a
too.
boxing fan.
we
Yeah.
could.
Too.
Um,
Well, I'll tell you what,
well,
guys, it's been a hell of a show. You know, I thought
Yeah.
Magnum was going to give us about 45 minutes or an hour. He gave us an hour and 45 minutes.
he's a
Just so you
classic
guys
guy.
know.
What a
He gave us an
stud.
hour and 45. That's amazing.
Thanks to you,
And-
Angelo, for putting it all
and-
together, buddy.
Right.
Yeah, and he told me he's gonna come back.
Great.
Because we talked before the show. Well, what I want to do is go around the horn and have everybody plug their merch. So, Tombstone, since you're the guest and you got the first and last questions, plug Devotion, plug Tombstone Jesus, plug your
Appreciate it,
merch.
guys. Appreciate it. Devotion Championship Wrestling. Get on YouTube. It's a television show here locally in Utah. You can see it on the CW30, but around the world, just get on YouTube. Every one of those television shows get uploaded. There's stuff in the archives from back in 2019. It's been a company for a year. That's the other thing, guys. Now we're looking at about a year and a half. But before Vince got with us, we'd only been in a company in wrestling for a year. And
Yeah.
so to have Vince Russo working with us at this point, the owner, Manny Lemons, I couldn't be more proud and just happy to be part of this organization. That being said, Tombstone Jesus, friend me on Facebook or follow me on Instagram. And then, guys, before I was a wrestler, I was a little bit of a YouTube star. Get over to my YouTube channel and subscribe. You'll find wrestling. You'll find music. I am the inventor, shall we say, of mountain metal. Okay, so we're like Leonard Skinner meets Motorhead.
Yeah.
I'm the singer, writer, play guitar, play bass. Check it out, and a lot of comedy on there too. So check it all out.
They call Tombstone Jesus the king of mountain metal.
Mountain Metal Messiah.
The Mountain Metal Messiah. You're right. I'm sorry. You're right. Mountain Metal
worries,
Messiah.
brother.
Well, there was
No
a lot
worries.
to take in today, brother. There was a lot to take in.
Hey, I
Watched
tell
a
you,
lot
a
of
dream
wrestling.
come true for me today, man. This universe works in mysterious
Well,
ways.
I
So
just
gotta
want to
tell
tell everybody watching that, get used to seeing Tombstone Jesus on Wrestling with the Future because he's going to be back a lot.
Good.
Hell yeah.
He's going to be back with us a lot. Mikey Messier. See that?
Well,
He's trying
yeah.
to inspire us. I got pencils for arms.
I would show my giant calves, but the camera won't have enough space to see my Rocky painting.
Them ramen noodles, look out.
I'm telling you.
I wanted to mention that Nikita Breznikov, a good friend of the show family, will be talking with me on a special Refs Roundtable, Angelo. And we have a theme for the show. The theme will be something, hypothetically, if the McMahons decide to sell the WWE, what would that mean for WWE itself and the rest of the pro wrestling world? So we're going into the world of the hypothetical. There have been some rumors and innuendos, and we're not saying that this is happening. We're going into our speculation mode. Nikita and myself will be doing that tomorrow. Life Lessons. Yes, Life Lessons with Mikey Messier continues. 4 episodes in the can with more to come. You can see them on the Wrestling with the Future YouTube channel as well as MikeMessier.com. And Avalonia Festival is still accepting submissions of films, and there's a pro wrestling film category, the Ox, Nelson, and Dano category for 3 friends of mine, Ox Baker, Nelson Frazier Jr., known as Mabel or Big Daddy V, and Brian Danovich, the toughest man from Tough Enough 4. So for filmmakers out there, consider to enter Avalonia Festival.
Terrific. And Dan the Man Sebastiano.
I just want to point out, Tombstone, that I think Mountain Metal Messiah, much better ring to it than Monday Night Messiah. So I think you got him beat on that one.
Well, I've been
Absolutely.
claiming it for about 14 years, just so you know.
There you go. Got a better look and a better product. I like it. But if as for me, I'm on Twitter, the man _WWTF, and you see me on our YouTube channel, Wrestling with the Future. I got the rest of our videos uploaded this week, so we are good to go.
All right.
And you're doing a hell of a job with our Facebook group page, which is Wrestling with the Future. It's a private group. You've got to answer some questions to join and be approved. And you're doing a hell of a job with that, and thank you for that. And Mike Messier doing an amazing job with our YouTube channel. Mikey is in charge of our, I'm sorry, not our, of the, I'll get it, of the Life's Lessons with Mike Messier. He's been uploading life lessons and some additional materials. And we will have some other wrestling-related materials from Mike Messier. Of course, Dan, you've got the YouTube channel that you've been working on, a great job with it. And of course, the Wrestling with the Future group page. We do have a public page also. It's facebook.com/Wrestling with the Future. And that's open to everybody. You can submit your, questions, comments there. You can still see some videos there. But check them out while they're still there, because they will be taken down shortly. We want everybody to go to our YouTube channel to watch the videos. We are on Twitter, and I know Mike Messier, you're taking care of our Twitter.
I'm in the mix, brother. I'm promoting the show and the videos on Twitter. Wrestling Future, WRESTLIN Future. If you just put Wrestling with the Future podcast, it'll show up with the emblem, and the T-shirt's also available. Angela,
it sure
make
will.
sure. Yep,
absolutely. And speaking of which, we've got merch. Got to plug our merch.
Why not?
Wrestling with the Future T-shirts, and I'll make sure I'm bleeding out in my green screen here. Here we go. Move my microphone.
Don't worry, folks. If you buy the shirt comes in full, not in sections.
That's a good-looking shirt there.
And they are available in large, extra large, and 2X, and special sizes if you specify. We can make them as big as you want. And let's see, we've got Wrestling with the Future Facebook. We've got, submit your questions and comments, guest suggestions, wrestlingwiththefuture@gmail.com. You can reach us there. You can reach out to Dan, Mike Messier. You can even reach out to Tombstone Jesus, and he'll get you in contact with Devotion or himself or us if you want. So he's part of the family now, and you're going to be seeing a lot of them. So on the downside of it now, we're pushing 2 hours and 30 minutes. So we're going to say goodnight, folks. Take care. Be safe. Happy wrestling, everybody. Bye-bye.